Please bow your heads with me in prayer. Lord Jesus, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Unconditional love. We love it. We love the idea of it. We want it in our lives. We would all like to believe ourselves capable of giving unconditional love. The reality is, behavior matters. It makes a difference. It makes a difference in our lives. Our behavioral choices make a difference in the lives of others. And those choices make a difference in the nature of the relationships that we have with one another. I love you does not, and in fact cannot mean that what you do doesn't matter. What you do still makes a difference. If you are beating your wife, no one thinks that that love should be unconditional. There should be a condition. You should be expected to stop. Even if an emotional connection continues with various challenges we can have in our relationships, the experience and the expression of that love will change. It will be different based on the actual behavior. Now, even if we accept that unconditional love may not be the absolute thing between people, we still want to believe it about God. We want to believe that God's love for us is unconditional. And we would like to believe that our love for God is unconditional. I believe it is true that there's nothing you or I can do or not do that will diminish God's love for us, his care for us, his commitment to us. And yet, God does allow us to live with the consequences of our own choices, with the consequences of our sin. And sometimes we live with the consequences of the choices and sin of others. And sometimes we live with the consequences of tragedy that are beyond anybody's control. Hurricanes, mutating viruses, all sorts of circumstances that we can't control, and yet we live with those consequences. God's love for us is not an assurance that everything will be nice and easy. That's not what his love for us means or promises. There's a history in the church on the other extreme as well, and it's taken from places like the first line of our gospel lesson today when Jesus said, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments." And it's easy for us to hear that as a conditional statement that as long as you behave, Jesus will love us. That's what we would hear that to mean between people. And we easily slip into at least subconsciously believing it about our relationship with God. We may not be so crass as to come out and say it, but it's a very commonly held notion that somehow God's love for me is contingent on the degree to which I obey the commandments. I've heard many times people say things like, "Why didn't God answer my prayers? I go to church, I give, I serve, I take care of other people, I'm not a bad person." That's really an expression of this kind of subconscious notion that somehow God's love for me is directly conditional. If you want a real lesson on that, read the book of Job. That's really what the whole book of Job in the Old Testament is about. And what it says in the end is God's ways are sometimes inscrutable. Sometimes we will not understand, but God's commitment, his love, his care remains. Or consider Santa Claus, for example. Now, Santa Claus, there's a works righteousness kind of guy, isn't it? You better behave or you're going to just get a lump of coal. And we start to apply that same notion, at least at some subconscious level. It's one of the reasons why we never made much of a deal of Santa Claus with our children. It's because I didn't want to give them that message that you better behave, you better straighten up, or you'll just have a lump of coal for Christmas. No, we need to set an example of love that is not conditioned, and yet we have to face the reality that our behavior matters. And so we come to a sentence like this: if you love me, you will keep my commandments. Or as he says further on down, they who have my commandments and keep them are those who love me. And those who love me will be loved by my Father, and I will love them and reveal myself to them. Again, tying love to the keeping of the commandments. So what is the right balance? How do we understand this interplay of our behavior and our choices and God's love for us and our love for one another? First thing, let me say, I do not want us to envision God keeping score. He's very clear that his forgiveness is absolute and complete, and he places our sin as far as the east is from the west. In other words, as far away as you can possibly imagine. God is not a scorekeeping God who sits up there and loves us as long as we get our 80% or better. God does not answer our prayers simply because we are obedient enough. Oh, well, he got 70%, so I only get a little answer to prayer. But she got 90%, so, she'll get a lot of her prayers answered. No, that is not the way that God works. Think about marriage as a way to approach understanding the place of love and behavior and how they work together. You may believe that your love is unconditional in a healthy marriage relationship. But the truth is, you won't experience a loving relationship unless you actually treat each other with love and care. You may retain a certain willful commitment to that person, but to experience that love, to grow in that love, to have it integrated into who you are and into the fabric of that relationship requires that you behave in loving ways toward one another. I love you. Now fix my dinner, clean my house, meet my sexual desires, but don't expect me to do anything for you. No, it doesn't work. You may get a servant out of that, but you will not get a loving, growing, living relationship. I love you, but buy me this and buy me that and get me a bigger house and get me a nicer car. Treat me the way I want to be treated, but I'm not going to do anything to take care of you. That doesn't work either. If you want to enjoy, live in, and grow in that loving relationship, both need to work on it. Both need to behave in loving ways toward one another. And it's more than just getting the other person to love you. It also affects our own ability to experience and receive love. Was rather famously put by the author Stephen Chbosky in his book Perks of Being a Wallflower. We accept the love we think we deserve. We accept the love we think we deserve. And my experience of people in their relationship with God and in married couples is that if we know we are not behaving in a loving way toward the other person, it becomes nearly impossible to believe that that person actually loves us. We don't receive that love even if it's there. They may say and do all the right things, but if we know that we are not behaving in a loving way toward them, we deny ourselves that experience of love. We deny the opportunity to have it influence us and change us and shape us. It is the giving of love that actually opens us to receiving the love. If you want to build your love for another person, pray for them, serve them, care for them. That's what builds the love. That's what builds your love for them. Not just about their love for you, looking for some kind of a reciprocal thing, but to build your love for them. Genuine love, as opposed to just lust or desire, causes us to want to do what is best for the other. Not as I have to do this kind of discipline, but as a matter of just what flows out of the soul that loves another person. We want to serve them. We want to care for them. Now, the good Lord knows we are not perfect at that. We fall short of that standard all the time. But that's where it has to begin. If we want to find that living, growing, vibrant relationship in our marriages, in our family, in our friendships, and in our relationship with God, it has to begin by you and I behaving in loving ways toward the other, by seeking to do what is best for them. Love and service, love and obedience go together. They are tied together hand in hand. Not that the love is conditional, but they are just bound up in the way that we are wired. If you want to have a more loving relationship with God, if you want to find Jesus more alive and at work in your life, then begin by beginning to pattern your life in ways that serve what Jesus would call you to do, in ways that follow his example, in ways that do the things that Jesus did. That's how we show our love for God. And that's how we then open ourselves to find and experience that love for God and his love for us. And if you want to find the same thing in your marriage or in the other relationships that you have, it's the same pattern. Begin by seeking to be of service to the other person. And that will begin to open you to receiving that love. Now, sometimes that won't go as we plan. That's the harsh reality of human relationships. Sometimes we disappoint each other. But if you don't begin there with that choice to love and care for and serve the other sacrificially, that experience of love will never grow. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. It's not a if-then proposition. It is a simple statement that the two are inexorably tied together. They cannot be separated. And so if we want to find ourselves living in the love of God, experiencing the love of God, begin by seeking to follow what he calls us to do. Amen.